I spent 11 years reading water meters for the municipal utility in a county I won't name, and for most of that time the strangest thing I ever found was a hornet's nest built inside a meter box. That's the kind of job it is. You drive a route, you pop the lid, you take a reading, or if it's a smart meter, you confirm the transmitter is talking to the tower. You log it, you move on. The work is so quiet and so repetitive that you stop noticing you're doing it, the way you stop hearing a refrigerator hum. I'm telling you about the meters because the horror of what happened doesn't make sense unless you understand how boring it was supposed to be. There's no drama in a water meter. It counts. It reports. The number only goes up, because water only flows one direction, out of the main and into a house. That's the whole physics of it. A meter that runs backward is broken, and a broken meter gets flagged and swapped. There is no mystery. That's what I loved about it, honestly. After I got divorced, I wanted a job where nothing surprised me, and for 8 years that's what I had. The system we used was called the AMI network, Advanced Metering Infrastructure. Instead of walking every yard, most of the county's meters sent their readings over a low-frequency radio signal to collector units on water towers and cell poles. The readings came into a central database 4 times a day. My job by then had shifted from walking routes to babysitting that database. I sat in a small office behind the treatment plant, and I watched for exceptions. A meter that stopped reporting, a reading that jumped too high, which usually meant a leak, a reading that dropped to 0, which usually meant a vacant house or a cut line. Exceptions generated a work order, and either I drove out or I sent one of the field techs. The first thing that was wrong, I almost didn't see, because it wasn't an exception. It was the opposite. It was a meter behaving perfectly at an account that shouldn't have existed. The account number was 4471C. The service address was listed as 88 Relcut Road, and I knew, the way you know the layout of your own childhood house, that Relcut Road did not exist. I'd worked that whole quadrant of the county on foot for years. There was a Rel Creek Road, out past the fairgrounds, 11 houses on it, all of them on my old walking route. There was no Relcut. But 4471C had a full billing history. It had a meter reporting on schedule, 4 times a day, a nice steady consumption pattern, a little in the morning, a spike in the evening, low overnight. The usage of a house where somebody actually lived. My first thought was a typo. Somebody in billing had fat-fingered creek into cut years ago and it had propagated. That happens. So I pulled up Rel Creek Road to compare, and every house on Rel Creek was there. All 11, all accounted for, none of them numbered 88. Rel Creek only went up to 34. So 88 Rel Cut wasn't a mangled duplicate of a real address. It was its own thing, sitting in the database, drinking water. I did what anyone would do. I put the address into the county GIS map, the same parcel viewer the assessor's office uses. Nothing. No parcel, no lot line, no road. I put it into a regular map. Nothing. I called the field tech who covered that area, a guy named Denny who'd been there longer than me, and I asked him if he'd ever heard of Relcut Road. There was a pause on the line, and I remember the pause because Denny was not a man who paused. Denny answered questions before you finished asking them, and he said, "Who gave you that address?" I told him nobody gave it to me. It was in the AMI database, account 4471C, reporting fine. He said, "Don't drive out there." And I laughed, because there was no there to drive to, and I told him that. He didn't laugh. He said, "Just flag it as a known exception and leave it. It reports fine, right? So leave it alone. You don't touch the ones that report fine." And then he changed the subject to a leak we had over by the school, and he was so obviously done talking about Relcut that I let it go. But I'm a person who watches a database for a living. I notice patterns. And now that I'd seen 4471C, I couldn't stop seeing it. Every time the readings came in, 4 times a day, there it was, faithful as a heartbeat. Morning trickle, evening spike, overnight low. Somebody at 88 Relcut Road was taking a shower after work and running the dishwasher at night and getting up in the morning to make coffee. The consumption curve of an ordinary life. So I did the thing Denny told me not to do. Except I did it from my chair, which felt safer. I pulled the full account history on 4471C. And this is where the floor tilted a little, because the account went back 31 years. 31 years of continuous service. 31 years of readings, first from a manual walk route. Somebody had physically written down numbers from a physical meter at 88 Rel Cut Road, decade after decade. And then, when the county upgraded, the account had transitioned to AMI like everything else. It had a radio transmitter ID. It was assigned to a collector, Collector 12, up on the tower off Batson Ridge. I knew Collector 12. I'd been up that tower, and I knew what it could reach, because coverage is just geometry, line of sight and signal strength, and the coverage footprint for Collector 12 was mapped down to the parcel. So I overlaid 4471C's transmitter onto the coverage map to see where in the footprint it was physically sitting. It wasn't in the footprint. The transmitter for 88 Rel Cut was reporting to Collector 12 from a point about 2 miles outside anything Collector 12 could possibly hear. A low-frequency transmitter that size has a hard range. It cannot talk to a tower, it can't reach any more than you can whisper across a canyon. But there was the signal, 4 times a day, strong, clean, on schedule. I want to be clear that at this stage I was not scared. I was annoyed, in the specific way you get annoyed when a machine does something machines don't do. I assumed there was a boring explanation and I was just missing it. Maybe a repeater. Maybe the transmitter had been relocated at some point, and the coordinates were stale. I decided I'd figure it out properly, and figuring it out properly meant going into the archive room. Every utility has one. Ours was a converted storage closet in the old part of the plant, full of banker's boxes and a couple of filing cabinets that predated the computer system. Route books, old work orders, the paper skeleton of the thing before it went digital. I signed the room out. You had to sign it out. Another detail that seemed pointless until later. And I went looking for the physical route that would have included Rel Cut Road 31 years ago. I found it. And this is the part I've never been able to explain to anyone in a way that lands, so I'll just tell it plainly. The old paper route book had Rel Cut Road in it, hand-drawn map in the front, the way the old readers used to sketch their routes. And Rel Cut was there, branching off the county road right about where, in the modern world, there's a guardrail and a drop into a ravine. The route book listed the houses. 88 Rel Cut was one of 6. And next to each address, in the reader's handwriting, were the monthly readings going back further than the digital record. Because the digital record only kept 31 years, but the paper went back further, and the paper said Rel Cut Road had been on the walk route for a very long time. Then, at a certain month, the handwriting stopped. Not all at once. The reader, I could see it in the numbers, had kept reading 5 of the 6 houses, then 4, then 2, then just 1. Just 88. For years, just 88. And in the margin next to 88, in a different pen, somebody had written a single instruction. And it wasn't spooky. That's what got me. It was administrative. It said, do not remove. Do not disconnect. Read only. Per DG. DG. I knew who that was. That was our director, or it had been back then. Same initials as the man who still ran the place. It was his father. The job runs in families in a county like this. I sat in that closet a long time, because here's what I understood, sitting there. The instruction wasn't a warning about something impossible. It was a policy for managing something impossible. Somebody, 30-plus years ago, had learned that if you left 88 Rel Cut Road connected, it kept reading like a lived-in house. And somebody had decided the correct response was to leave it connected and never talk about it. Read only. Do not disconnect. The most bureaucratic haunting in the world. I could have stopped there. I want you to know I considered it. Denny told me to leave it alone. The paper told me to leave it alone. But I'm going to be honest about my own flaw, because it's the reason for everything that came after. I don't leave things alone. I never have. It's the same thing that ended my marriage. I couldn't let a silence sit. I had to open it up and find out what was underneath. So I did the one thing the entire system was built to prevent. I looked at what disconnect would actually mean. And in doing that, I found the reason for the rule. The digital record had a field most people never look at, called account continuity. It tracks whether service was ever interrupted. On 4471C, service had been interrupted exactly once, 31 years ago, right at the seam where paper became digital. Somebody, during the transition, had disconnected 88 rel cut, probably to clean it out of the system, probably thinking exactly what I'd thought. This address isn't real. Delete it. The disconnection lasted 11 days. And I remembered 11 days 31 years ago because everybody in the county remembers it, even people my age who were kids then. That was the 11 days they pulled 3 people out of the ravine below the guardrail on the county road. 3 separate single-car accidents at the same curve in less than 2 weeks, in a spot that had never had a fatal wreck before or since. It was the kind of thing that made the papers, that made the state come look at the road, that made them put up the extra signage and the reflectors that are still there. Everyone always said it was a bad stretch, a blind curve, fog off the creek. The 11th day, service was restored to 88 Rel Cut Road, and the wrecks stopped, and they never happened again. I'm not going to tell you I believe those things are connected the way cause connects to effect. I read water meters. I don't have a framework for this, but I can tell you what the man who wrote "Do Not Disconnect" believed, and I can tell you the whole apparatus of that office was built, quietly, over 3 decades, on the assumption that as long as somebody kept reading 88 Rel Cut Road, kept treating it as a house where a person lived, kept the water flowing to the place where the road used to be, nothing came back up that curve looking for the people who'd forgotten it. I closed the account history. I did not disconnect it. I put the root book back in its box, and I made the decision that I thought was the responsible one, the competent one, the one that let me keep sleeping. I would do exactly what my job required. I would keep the account current, read only, and I would never ever say the address out loud, because by then I understood that the reading was a kind of attention, and attention was the whole point, and I did not want that attention pointed at me. That worked for almost 2 years. What changed it wasn't dramatic. That's the part I keep coming back to. In the movies there's a moment, a door blows open, a light explodes. What actually happened is that one morning the readings came in, 4 accounts a second scrolling past, and my eye caught on Fort 471C the way it always did, and the consumption was wrong. Not gone. Not zero, higher. The overnight low, the flat dead hours between 2 and 5 a.m., when even a lived-in house goes quiet. It wasn't flat anymore. Somebody at 88 Rel Cut Road was running water at 3 in the morning. A lot of it. Steady, continuous flow, the kind you get from an open tap or a running line. Continuous flow at a house triggers a leak alert. The system did what it was built to do. It generated a work order, and the work order needed to go to a field tech, and it needed a name and an address on it, printed, physical, the way our work orders always were. The printer in the corner of my office turned itself on and printed a work order for 88 Rel Cut Road, and I sat there and watched a machine put that address onto a piece of paper in the physical world, and I understood that the reading was no longer just me watching it. It was reaching back. I called Denny. It was 5 in the morning, and he answered on the first ring, no pause this time, like he'd been waiting years for this exact call. I told him about the overnight flow and the work order, and Denny said the thing I've thought about every day since. He said, it's not asking for a reader anymore. It's asking for a visit. And then he said, how many times has it printed? I looked. It had printed the work order 4 times, once for each reading cycle that day. And the 4th copy, still warm in the tray, wasn't for 88 Rel Cut Road. The service address on the 4th one was mine. I don't want to make this sound more supernatural than it felt, because what it felt like was clerical. My home address, the little rental I moved into after the divorce, printed on a utility work order under an account number I'd never seen, 4471D, same root account. A new suffix, like a house being added to a route. Like the road was getting longer, and my street was the next stop on it. Denny told me to come in and pull my own account and delete the new suffix before the next cycle. And I want to tell you I did the smart thing, but I didn't, because the smart thing and the safe thing had finally come apart. Deleting an account is a disconnection. And I knew what disconnection did. 11 days, 3 wrecks. I did not know what would happen if I disconnected 4071D, but I knew it would be the same category of mistake somebody made 31 years ago, and I knew who paid for that mistake. 3 people who had nothing to do with any of it, who just drove a curve at the wrong hour. So I left it connected. I let the account for my own house sit there in the system next to the drowned one, reading 4 times a day, and I did the only thing the whole 31-year policy had ever actually asked of anyone. I kept the water flowing. I kept the reading current. I paid the attention the place wanted paid, so it wouldn't have to come and collect it. That was 6 years ago. I quit the utility a month later. Not because I was scared to stay, because I finally understood that leaving didn't matter. The account isn't tied to the building behind the treatment plant. It's tied to me. I still get a water bill at a house I don't live in anymore, an account nobody at the utility will admit exists, 4471D, and every month the usage is a little curve of an ordinary life. Morning trickle, evening spike, overnight low. I pay it. Every month, on time, I pay for water at a house down a road that isn't there, and I never say the address out loud. And I keep the reading current, because I've read enough meters to know that a number only goes one direction, and I am not willing to find out what it costs to make one stop.